got my own walk-up music. That's what I love. I'm not pitching for a Major League Baseball team, but certainly nice. Thank you for the nice introduction. I mean, it was really very nice. So nice. I'd want to listen to me, but lower your expectations, folks, because we're just, we're just trying. We're like you guys. We're just trying to figure it out. First of all, I want to say what a delight it is to be with you. It has been an honor this weekend, Friday night, then all day yesterday. And then this morning at the first service here. And just thanks. Thanks for your hospitality and being willing to listen. We're humbled by that. Cheryl is here, ladies and gentlemen. We have been married. We've been married for more than many years. We've been married for 45 years, going on 46. We do have many grandchildren, 11 to be specific. So if I look broke, you know why that is. And we're here with Cheryl's family. Her sister and brother-in-law are with us. It is a delight to be with old friends. The Penners are people we've known forever as they used to attend our church. And then this morning, I was surprised, pleasantly surprised. One of our board members, Pastor Scott, is with us, John Dix, his wife, Carol Lee. And brother, well, during the worship, I'm in the back, and I saw your text that you were coming. I didn't see that until I saw your face this morning. Didn't know you were here, but I'm so thankful. They live in Maryland. They made the hour-long drive up here to be with us today, and what a blessing it is to see them. It really is. Having said all that, you are the reason we're here, so thanks for showing up. Okay. It's been a long weekend, and I'm a little bit tired, so if I have those momentary hiccups and I look like I've lost my train of thought, I have, so pray for me. But let me just start this way. I want to explain the Oikos idea to those of you who may not fully understand it yet. Picture your life taking place on a stage in a large room, kind of like this one. And everybody you have ever connected with at any level personally is in the seats, filling up the room. Some of the people you don't see often, they're in the back row. No offense back there. We love you too. Some of the people you know a little better. You see them a little more often. Maybe they're sitting in the middle of the room, but then there are those who have been given the high privilege by God Himself to supernaturally and strategically seat you in the front row, the best seats in the house that anyone could have, to watch the way you live your life and listen to what you say about the things that are important to you. They have better clarity than anyone you've ever known. On average, at any point in time, there are 8 to 15 people sitting in those seats. The Greeks call that group an oikos. So Jesus is talking to a bunch of farmers, and I know out here, beautiful farm country, so you ought to get this, better than where I live, which is the desert in California. And he said, you fellas, Jesus speaking, you fellas have a saying. It's 3 months to the harvest. I'm sure those guys all looked at each other like, yeah, that's something we say to each other. And then Jesus said, but I tell you, just open your eyes, man, because the fields are white unto harvest. It's harvest time, like Pastor Scott said. Turn in your Bibles, if you brought them. We're going to look into the Gospel of Mark today, starting in chapter 4. And you can follow along there. We've got the verses on screen for you too. But we're going to start in Mark chapter 4 and tell you a story. We read this passage earlier in the service. We're going to see it again in the next few minutes. But this is a story that is one of the most famous stories in the Bible. I mean, when I start telling the story, or maybe when we read it earlier and we saw this story on screen and we heard it read to us, we're thinking, oh yeah, I know that story. Story took place early in Jesus' ministry. He had been teaching in Galilee, which, as you may know, was like his home turf. It's like playing on a home court for Jesus and the disciples. That's where they were from. And the disciples were with him, and things were going pretty well, and they were having these large crowds come to hear Jesus teach. And on this particular day, there was a crowd that had gathered that was so large, it forced Jesus off the shore of the Sea of Galilee, forced him to teach out of a boat. So all these people are on the shoreline listening to Jesus talk and teach, and he's sharing some parables, some of the most popular parables he ever taught. Maybe you've heard of the parable of the sower and the seed. He shared it on that day. Maybe you heard the parable of the mustard seed. He shared that one too that day. And they're all having a good time. And then seemingly out of the blue, Jesus tossed a nuke into their laps. He said in Mark chapter 4, verse 35, that day when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let us go over to the other side. See, that's the nuke. Because that's a problem. The other side is not just like, hey, they got another beach over there, let's go check that out. The other side was actually a very specific term in that culture. It was not just the other side of a body of water, a beautiful sea like the Sea of Galilee. Jesus was talking about a region known as the Decapolis. Now, Decapolis, it's a weird word to us, but it's a Greek word, and it means 10 cities. And it was not friendly territory for any self-respecting Jewish rabbi and their disciples, because those 10 cities were filled with pagan people. See, it wasn't just the wrong side of the tracks. I mean, that's our vernacular. This was the wrong side of the world. In fact, we have to go back a while into the Old Testament, the book of Joshua, chapter 3, verse 10, to kind of find out some origins about who lived there. It says in that passage, this is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. See, when God gave the nation of Israel, or the people of Israel, the promised land to enter, they confronted these people groups. And God essentially said, you got to go. I've given this land to my people. Now, fast forward hundreds of years. And the Decapolis that we read in Mark chapter 4 is where those 7 nations of Canaan settled when they were driven out of the land that God had given to Israel. God said he was going to prove his love for his people by removing these people groups from this land. So, you can imagine that now the descendants of those 7 nations were still pretty hacked off at the Jewish God and the nation of Israel. The Decapolis was filled with all kinds of Weird stuff, man. Yeah, pagan temples. And there's some raunchy stuff going on in those temples. All of this cult worship, it combined some weird sexual practices with extreme violence. It was everything that you and I would absolutely want to avoid. We'd not want to be associated with what goes on the other side. The Decapolis was also a center for Roman power. You know the animal in Israel that was considered the most unclean? You know what I'm talking about? The pig? Yeah. Well, that was the symbol of power in the Decapolis. See, on the other side, pigs were actually worshipped. There was a legion of Roman soldiers stationed in the Decapolis, 6,000 soldiers. And they had a symbol, they had a logo for that particular legion in the Roman army. You know what it was? It was that head of a boar. Yeah, then one day the disciples hear Jesus casually say, "Hey, fellas, let's go over and visit those folks." It's almost like Jesus forgot who lived there. Well, we pick up the action now in chapter 5, and Jesus and the guys go over the disciples, and they all land there in the Decapolis. Now remember, Jesus had been drawing all these big crowds, his very positive vibe on his side of the Sea of Galilee. But in the Decapolis, no big crowds, man. There's not even a welcoming committee, except for one guy. And he's possessed by an evil spirit. Dude's a whack job. And that's it. But nobody should be shocked at that, right? I can hear the disciples now saying, this is exactly why we don't come over here. They went across the lake, verse 1, a region of the Gerasenes, and Jesus gets out the boat, and a man with an impure spirit came out of the tombs to meet him. It's where the guy lived, in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even a chain, or with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot. But he would tear the chains apart. He would break the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Man, that's a scary dude. Night and day, he'd just wander around the tombs, wander through the hills, and he would cry out and cut himself with stones. But then he saw Jesus in the distance. And he ran and he fell on his knees in front of Jesus. I mean, this is a weird story, you guys, and it's about to get weirder. He shouts at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus? Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." And then Jesus asked him, "What's your name?" He said, "My name is Legion, for we are many." See, legion is a loaded word. Like a lot of other words, a lot of other images in this story. Remember, there are a legion of Roman soldiers who actually live there. They're stationed there. The name was chosen intentionally to intimidate people. But the demons who possess this man are actually afraid of Jesus. Verse 10, he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside, and the demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." And Jesus gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out of the man, went into the pigs, the herd, about 2,000 in number. 2,000 pigs rushed down the steep bank into the lake, and they were drowned. It's interesting that the demons begged Jesus not to send them out of the area. See, this kind of reminds us, and maybe this will be new to you, I don't know, but angels are that way. Demons are fallen angels. And it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're talking about, whether you're talking about holy angels or angels that became disloyal to God and followed Lucifer in his rebellion, and we call them demons, they're still angels. And when angels were created by God, they were created with a territorial nature. You'll notice throughout the Bible, the holy angels, when they're given a specific assignment, they stick to that assignment. And the demons in this story are now kind of reflecting their territorial nature by saying, whatever you do, don't send us out of the area. That's very angelic. And so Jesus said, you may go into the pigs. At least they live here. You know, when I think of pigs, I think of one thing: bacon, right? Puts a smile on my face just thinking about the smell of bacon. Or maybe I think of these cute little animals in movies, TV. Remember Babe the Pig, kind of the star of the show? Or some of you I can see are my generation. Does the name Arnold Ziffel mean anything to you? Because Green Acres is the place to be, right? You know, Jews don't look at pigs the way we do. Can you imagine the disciples watching what we've read to this point, watching that all unfold? Those guys would have seen this as a showdown between the forces of darkness and the forces of light. And they would have loved such a dramatic and absolute victory as the one they just witnessed. But the people who lived there, now their response is different. It says in verse 14, those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what happened. They couldn't believe the story. Bless you. When they came to Jesus, they saw the guy who had been possessed by the legion of demons, no chains, no irons around his feet, just sitting there, having a conversation. He's dressed. He's in his right mind. And they were afraid. What kind of power does this? And those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man. And they even included the part about the pigs. And then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. Find that interesting. They don't respond by saying, you did this, Jesus? You saved this guy. You healed this guy. That's amazing. Can you help our sick friend? Can you help my possessed child? Can you come to our town and help work out some of the problems we're going through? None of that. They just begged Jesus to go. They were as afraid of someone from the Jewish side as the Jews were afraid of them. And so Jesus, being the perfect guest, I guess he's the perfect everything, but you know what I'm saying. He gets ready to leave. And as he was getting into the boat, verse 18, the man who had been demon-possessed begged him. Gotta love the way the language reads here. He begged him, please, Jesus, let me go with you. I've got no life here. The Greek is rather abrupt with Jesus' response. Jesus did not let him. He said essentially, absolutely not, because that's not the way this thing's going to work. What I want you to do is go home to your own people You know that term, your own people? You know in the Greek New Testament what that term is? Oikos. Jesus said, I want you to go home, and I want you to talk to the people in your front row seats. And I want you to tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. The guy literally begs Jesus to take him back to Galilee. And Jesus says, no, I want you to stay and share this experience with your own people, with your family, with your friends. And I can imagine what the guy's thinking as the boat with Jesus and the disciples is kind of being lost over the horizon on the lake. And he says to himself, guy saved my life, least I can do is what he asked of me. Verse 20, so the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Now, just stop for a minute and reflect on what we've read to this point. The people in the Decapolis were afraid of Jesus, but they were amazed by the man's story about what Jesus had done in his life. Be sure and hold that thought. Because one chapter later, in Mark chapter 6, there was a miraculous feeding. And then 2 chapters after that, in Mark chapter 8, there was another miraculous feeding of 4,000 men and their families. The one in Mark chapter 6 is a better known account, perhaps, for us because more people were involved. It was a feeding for 5,000 men and their families. And we tend to like the bigger numbers than the lesser numbers, so that's why we always want to talk about the feeding of the 5,000. But both numbers are fairly significant because that's just the men. It doesn't include women and children. See, in Mark chapter 6, the feeding of the 5,000 took place on Israel's side of the lake. In Mark chapter 8, the feeding of the 4,000 took place on the other side. In Mark chapter 6, the disciples were the ones who actually initiated the conversation about providing lunch for these hungry people because these were their people. Let's take a break and let these hungry people find something to eat. But in Mark chapter 8, the storyline evolves a little bit differently. Look at verse 1. During those days, another large crowd gathers. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They got nothing to eat. They've been with me 3 days. And if I send them away hungry, they're going to collapse on the way because of malnourishment. Some of them have come from a long distance. We got to get them something to eat. But in verse 4, the disciples actually push back. But where in this remote place can anyone get enough bread to feed them? See, in chapter 8, Jesus initiated the conversation. The disciples didn't think to. They thought those people could fend for themselves. They weren't their people. But as far as Jesus was concerned, those people were his people too. Just like people on the Israel side. See what Jesus is saying to both sides? You know, good news is coming for the 12 tribes of Israel. I haven't forgot about them. And good news is coming for the 7 nations of Canaan, because I haven't forgot about them either. They're also mine. I'm going to take care of them just like I take care of Israel. See, 12 tribes, 7 nations. It doesn't matter. God says, I love all of them. And here's something interesting. In Israel, where there were 12 tribes, 12 disciples, there were also 12 basketfuls left over. But in the Decapolis, there were 7 nations representing the ones who the Jews believed were undeserving of salvation. And there were 7 basketfuls left over. Oh, and just one more thing. When Jesus went to the Decapolis for the first time, as we've read, how many guys came out to meet him? 1 guy. And he's jacked up. Nobody else wants to have anything to do with Jesus. They just want Jesus to leave. But what happens the second time Jesus visits the Decapolis? Matthew tells us, Matthew chapter 15. He picks up the action there in verse 30. He says, great crowds came to Jesus, bringing the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. Laid these people at Jesus' feet, and he healed them. He'd have done that the first time, but they wouldn't let him. Now look at verse 31. And the people were amazed when they saw the mute speaking, the crippled made well, the lame walking, and the blind seeing. And they praised the God of Israel. Now hold the phone, bro. Are you serious right now? I mean, this would be like both sides of Congress in Washington coming together and actually doing something productive for the American people. You got the other side now worshiping the God of Israel. Man, what happened? See, I'm not a sociologist. I'm not even pretending to be one today. But I think I know what happened. One dude happened. One man happened, that's what happened. That one guy and the testimony he carried with him about what Jesus had done in his life, that's what happened. That one man taking the message of Christ to his own people. And by the way, every one of his own people, they all have their own people. And by the time Jesus came back, there was a lot of people who were amazed by Jesus. You know, many of the people in this region of Pennsylvania represent people on the other side. And it's not because everybody living out here is possessed by demons. Although you may know one or two and you're thinking, I'm not so sure. But it's just that so many of the people out here are lost. And if Jesus himself could talk to them, they probably wouldn't want to listen. I mean, we're going to have Thanksgiving. We're going to have the holidays, Christmas in December, Thanksgiving in November. It's all coming up. And around the holiday table, what are the first 2 things that are not allowed in the conversation? You can't discuss religion or politics. That's right. The people sitting, many of them, not all of them, but many of them sitting in your front row seats are afraid of God, but they're not afraid of you. They're afraid of Jesus, but they will be amazed by the story you share with them about Jesus. See, if I call my friends who don't know Christ, who know me, and I said, hey, I'm going to be at Starbucks this afternoon, and I got my friend Jesus who's going to be there with me. Why don't you come and talk to him? And they said, Jesus? You mean that Jesus? And I said, yeah, that Jesus. He'd love to talk to you. They probably would not show up. People are afraid of God. People are not afraid of us. At least not 8 to 15 of them. You know, conversions to Jesus generally require at least one important conversation. At some point, the gospel will be shared. But no important conversation has ever taken place without at least two people's permission. You don't have a conversation if somebody won't let you. How many of you have raised teenagers? I don't have to tell you that. And Jesus knows that the kind of permission that is needed for a meaningful conversation will most likely be granted by people you already know. People in your front row, people you've grown a level of trust with. Whether they're family members, parents, siblings, whether they're neighbors or co-workers or classmates. The Greeks called that group an Oikos, an extended family. And virtually all of us who followed Jesus, probably including you, most certainly including me, we made our decision to follow Christ because we had the opportunity to interact with one or more believers whom God had placed in our front row. Those people either demonstrated faith for us or shared faith with us, probably both. And it's amazing to think that for all believers, for all of us, from every generation, from every culture, from every denomination, for the past 2,000 years of church history, dating all the way back to the founder of the Christian movement himself. And you know who he is. Not a trick question, by the way. 95% of us came to faith primarily because of the influence of someone or a group of someones whom we already knew pretty well. In fact, I'll just do it again. Why not? Why don't you raise your hand if you would say, Tom, the reason that I'm here today, the reason that I'm even a Christian is primarily because of the influence of someone in my immediate family, maybe my parents or maybe my sibling. Maybe it was a classmate, maybe it was a neighbor, maybe it was someone you worked with, maybe it was a friend. And you would say, the reason that I am even here today is primarily because of the influence that they had in my life. Raise your hand, please, and hold your hand up high if it's true for you. Everybody, keep your hand up for just a second, because I want everybody to look around the room. Okay, put your hands down now. That's the way God builds his kingdom, 95% of the time. God is the most predictable person you'll ever meet. He doesn't throw curveballs. He throws fast balls, 90 miles an hour down the middle of the plate. You know what's coming. He's a God of numbers. He's a God of formulas. He built a predictable cosmos. Science is only possible because of the predictability of the universe. What goes up will always come. Light will always travel at 186,000 miles per second. 1 + 1 will always equal 2. And if you do not accept the predictability of God, you will flunk your math class. 95% of the time, the kingdom is built in the front row. Why would you ever think he would start a new plan tomorrow? I've actually asked the question I asked a second ago. I've asked that hundreds of audiences, personally on 5 continents, different nations. I think most every state in the United States, some iteration of some evangelical denomination, some gathering of believers, different ethnicities, different languages, different budget, different size rooms. independent churches, denominationally affiliated churches. The body of Christ is so diverse. So many different churches in so many different ways. I have never, ever, ever had one audience give me a different answer than the one you just gave me. Because God is predictable. And that's why after healing the demon-possessed man, Jesus told him to go home to your Oikos and tell him how much the Lord has done for you and how he's had mercy on you. Let me ask you another, little survey. How many of you would say God's done something for you? Oh, wow, that's great. How many of you would say God has shown me mercy? 2 hands are allowed. If Jesus were standing up here right now, what would he tell you to do next? I want you to go home to your own people and make sure they know that. See, that's why after Zacchaeus gave his heart to Jesus, Jesus said, today salvation has come to this Oikos. After Jesus healed the son of the politician, the Apostle John reflects on the fact that this guy and his whole Oikos came to faith. That's why Jesus, in calling Levi or Matthew to be his disciple, it says in Mark chapter 2, Jesus was having dinner with Levi's Oikos. And it had many tax collectors and sinners in it. Because if you're a Jewish tax collector, you got no friends unless there are other tax collectors and sinners. And yet many of them follow Jesus. That's why the angel told Cornelius that Peter's going to pay him a visit and that he will bring you a message to which you and all of your Oikos will be saved. Why? Why? Because God is the most predictable person you've ever met. You know what's interesting is we talk pastor stuff when we get together for a meal or a phone call, and it's amazing for us to realize that if God were to bring into his kingdom 100 people this year, and to bring them from the other side into his marvelous grace this year, through the ministry of this church, 100 baptisms. It's amazing to think that statistically 95 of them will have very little to do with what goes on in this room. It'll have very little to do with what Scott shares in these wonderful messages he prepares for you. 95 of those 100 new conversions for Christ will become a reality because of you. Because when Jesus gave us the Great Commission, he also made the Great Commission, you know what that is, to go into all the world. He also made the Great Commission scalable by giving us all a little piece of the pie. 95% of conversions for Christ always happen in the front row. Father, I thank you for giving us the opportunity this weekend to just hang out with these great people. And man, they're great. And you've given them, as well as all of us who follow you, you've given us a commission that is also great. And Lord, you've also given us an Oikos. You've given us our own people. And I just pray that you will work in our lives and generate in our hearts an interest in what you're doing globally to bring people from the lost side of reality to the saved side. And I pray that we will have what we need to not only show the kind of interest that causes us to make a list and to begin to pray and begin to invest and begin to invite, and even as we're doing today, to prepare for this great challenge. I just pray you'll give us your grace, give us your strength, and give us a great victory in this community in the days ahead. In Jesus' name. All God's children said, amen.
Before we have our closing song, I want to ask you to do something in light of what Tom's been teaching us today. And that is this. I'm asking you to do one thing. I'm asking you to pick up one of these cards. One of these cards that's just a very simple Oikos card. It's a card that says, these are my people. These are the people that God has sovereignly placed, strategically placed in my life. Neighbors, classmates, co-workers, relatives, your children, your grandchildren, your parents. People that you shop with regularly at the store. People that you're on their bowling team or in the garden club, or you take music or dance lessons from, or kids in your scout troop, or the guys you golf with, or the ladies you play mahjong with, or something like that. Whoever they are, would you take one of these cards today before you leave? There's some up here on the front row. There's some on the back table. There's some on the info desk. There's some on the bookshelf. They're all over the place. You can't leave without passing about 5 stacks of these cards today. I'm asking you to take one. And even if all you're doing right now is, okay, I'm taking it because Scott said, please take it, and you use it as a bookmark, that's fine. I personally believe God is not going to let you rest until you start putting names on it. Because he's called you and he's called me to love and pray for the people around us. I'm asking you to pick up the card and say, God, what do you want me to do with this? And I have a hunch he wants you to start noticing the people around you and write them down. And he's asking you to start praying for them. That's all. That's it. Just start there and see what God does. But please, let this be a day that we not only just hear and be motivated and inspired, but let's go do and bring glory to the name of God as we do this today. So let's talk about the Jesus way. How about that?
Yeah, Jesus gave us the perfect example, right? He used 8 to 15, right? He used 12 people to go out into the entire world. So as he said, let's stand and sing the Jesus way together, as he's taught us everything we need to know. If you curse me, then I will bless you. And if you hurt me, I will forgive. And if you hate me, then I will love you. I choose the Jesus way. If you're helpless, I will defend you. And if you're burdened, I'll share the weight. And if you're hopeless, then let me show you there's hope in the Jesus way. I follow Jesus. I follow Jesus. He wore my sin. I'll gladly wear He is the treasure. He is the answer. Oh, I choose the Jesus way. I choose surrender. I choose to love. Oh, God, my Savior, you'll always be enough. I choose forgiveness. I choose grace. I choose to worship no matter what I face. I choose the Jesus way. 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 I follow Jesus. I follow Jesus. He wore my sin. I'll gladly wear his name. He is the treasure. He is the answer. Oh, I choose the Jesus way. I follow Jesus. I follow Jesus. He wore my sin. I'll gladly wear his name. He is the treasure. He is the answer. Oh, I choose the Jesus way. Oh, I choose the Jesus way. Amen. Go in God's grace. We'll see you next week.